Tasha Williams had never been handed anything. She had grown up in a neighborhood that many others might have written off as hopeless, a place where success stories were rare, and even rarer was someone who dared to dream big. Her mother worked long hours in multiple jobs just to keep the lights on, teaching Tasha from a young age that if she wanted anything, she would have to fight for it. At 16, while other teens spent their time at the mall, Tasha was already taking apart broken computers and teaching herself to code. She repaired gadgets and electronics, sometimes for free, and used the money she earned to help pay the rent. By the time she was 18, she had saved enough money to attend a local community college. It was there that she fell in love with technology and the power it had to change the world. She applied to top schools, but despite a stellar SAT score and a portfolio that would have impressed any hiring manager, she was waitlisted at every prestigious university she applied to. Eventually, she enrolled at a small state school where she fought to keep up with classmates who had far more resources than she did. Her first job at a tech firm was a disaster. She was constantly overlooked, passed over for promotions in favor of less experienced white male colleagues. When she developed an innovative app that could save the company millions, her manager took full credit. She raised concerns, but was quickly labeled difficult. But Tasha didn't quit. She built her own company, Titan Technologies, at the age of 28. She mortgaged everything, her apartment, her car, every penny she could gather to start the company. She had 3 employees friends she had made during her college years working for equity. 15 years later, Titan Technologies was worth $2 billion. Tasha wasn't just another tech executive. She was an industry titan, recognized for transforming the landscape of cloud computing and artificial intelligence. On this fateful day, Tasha's flight was the culmination of years of hard work, ambition, and sweat. The Global Innovation Summit wasn't just another conference. It was an opportunity to secure the future of Titan Technologies, to change the direction of the entire industry. The keynote speech she was about to deliver could be the stepping stone to partnerships that would launch Titan to the next level. It was a day Tasha had been preparing for her entire life. But as she made her way to the boarding gate, she had no idea that her journey would be marked by something far greater than her career milestone. As Tasha stood at the gate, her boarding pass scrutinized by the flight attendant, she wondered for the briefest moment why this had to happen now. Why today, of all days? But instead of panicking, she remained steady. It was a lesson she had learned from years of being underestimated. How you respond in the face of adversity defines who you are. When the security guard arrived, forcing her to move from the gate to a small customer service desk, Tasha remained poised. She didn't argue. She didn't shout. She simply gave her usual calm but firm response. But in the process, she watched the moment slip away. The doors closed. Her flight took off without her, and that was when the tipping point came. The final straw. The moment that would set in motion a chain of events far beyond anyone's expectations. "Your flight has departed," the customer service representative said without a hint of remorse. "You missed your boarding time." Tasha clenched her fists. "No," she replied, her voice low, controlled. "Your staff prevented me from boarding. I've been detained for no reason, on false pretenses." By now, other passengers were gathering around, phones out, sensing something wasn't right. Tasha's calm but unwavering presence seemed to captivate them. "You will rebook me on the next flight in first class," Tasha said, her voice steady but filled with authority. "Not in economy. You owe me that." And when the airline refused, when they tried to manipulate the system to avoid compensating her for the abuse, Tasha made a decision that would change everything. The confrontation had reached its peak, and yet Tasha remained as calm as ever. But she was far from the naive businesswoman who walked into this terminal hours ago. She was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had fought for every inch of her success. And she wasn't going to let a corrupt airline keep her from what was rightfully hers. "Please, Richard," the customer service supervisor said, trying to maintain some semblance of professionalism. "You'll need to step aside. We're trying to resolve the issue." Tasha, standing tall now, gave a small, controlled nod. "I'm not stepping aside. Not until you've made things right." Richard's face turned a deep red as he glanced nervously around, perhaps realizing that more and more people were watching. His body language screamed discomfort, and it didn't help that his own staff was now beginning to shift uncomfortably. Some were even glancing at their phones, starting to get a sense that something was about to blow up. Tasha, on the other hand, felt the fire within her only grow stronger. She wasn't about to let this airline think they could get away with it. Not today. Let's make one thing clear, Tasha continued, her voice steady, but it carried enough authority to make the surrounding passengers listen closely. I will not sit back and let this go. You've harassed me, stolen my time, and now you're trying to downgrade me on a flight I paid for. This is not how you treat your passengers, and you need to fix this. Her words hung in the air, punctuated by the silence that followed. It wasn't the kind of quiet that came with uncertainty or hesitation. No, this was the silence before a storm. Nearby passengers, sensing the brewing conflict, started recording the incident. Phones were pulled out, their cameras capturing every second. Whispers rippled through the terminal. Many had seen how the airline treated Tasha, how she'd been humiliated, singled out. It was a story of injustice they could all relate to, even if they weren't the ones being directly affected. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice, Richard said, his voice trembling slightly. I'll raise my voice as high as I need to, Tasha replied, her tone unyielding. I'm not being intimidated, and I won't be silenced by your system of discrimination. Richard opened his mouth, ready to argue, but before he could speak, the airport security guards approached again, 2 of them this time. They were larger, more imposing. Their eyes locked on Tasha, and one of them took a step forward. You need to come with us now, the taller guard growled, reaching for her arm with a grip that felt unnecessarily harsh. Tasha held his gaze. Her pulse quickened, but she wasn't afraid. She had been in situations far more dangerous than this. This was just another battle, and she knew how to fight back. No, she said, her voice unwavering. You will not touch me. I have done nothing wrong. The security guard didn't let go, though. His fingers dug into her arm, and the pain was sharp. But she wasn't going to show it. Not now, not when she knew what was at stake. As he pulled her toward the exit, Tasha's mind raced. This wasn't just about a missed flight anymore. This was about something much larger. This was about the systemic racism and discrimination that she, and so many others like her, had endured for years. The prejudice had been so ingrained, so normalized, that those in positions of power believed they could act with impunity. The crowd continued to watch. They had seen the whole thing unfold. The way Tasha was treated differently from everyone else. The way she was forced to prove her worth just to board a plane. Many of them felt the injustice deep in their bones. It was a situation that, for so many people of color, felt all too familiar. And then something unexpected happened. A voice broke through the tension. Let her go. The voice was low, commanding, yet full of authority. It came from someone in the crowd, someone who, until that point, had been silent, but now stood in the center of the commotion. The security guards paused. Tasha turned her head, and her breath caught in her throat. The figure was tall, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit. He exuded power, and when he spoke, everyone else seemed to shrink back in reverence. It was none other than Bradley Winters, the CEO of Sky Globe Airlines. Tasha couldn't believe it. Of all the people, he was here. Bradley stood with an air of detachment, arms crossed, his gaze fixed on Tasha. Release her, he said again, his voice ringing through the terminal. He looked at the security guards with an expression of disdain, as if they were beneath him. But the guards, caught in an awkward position, hesitated. They had been following orders, and now they were unsure of what to do. Tasha's mind raced. Was this a moment of redemption? Or was he just another one of the men in power, here to uphold a system designed to suppress her? Bradley's gaze shifted from the guards to Tasha, and for a moment their eyes locked. His expression softened, ever so slightly. Miss Williams, he said, his tone now almost apologetic. Please come with me. Tasha's gut told her to be wary, but she knew she needed to act fast. Her flight was gone, but she wasn't going to let this moment slip away. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice steady. You know what's been happening here. You saw what your employees did. Bradley didn't flinch. I know, he admitted, and I can assure you, Miss Williams, this will be addressed. Tasha wasn't convinced. She didn't trust him, but she understood the power of leverage. The only way out of this was to play the game, for now. She nodded slowly. Fine, but you need to fix this, not just for me, but for everyone who's been hurt by your airline. Bradley hesitated for a moment, and then he gestured for the security guards to release her. They did, albeit reluctantly. Tasha took a deep breath, rubbing her sore wrist where the guard had gripped her too tightly. She didn't have time to linger on the pain. She had a plane to catch, one that would take her back to the fight she was born to win. Tasha followed Bradley Winters through the airport, her steps measured and deliberate. The tension between them hung in the air like smoke, heavy and suffocating. She didn't trust him. Not yet. She couldn't afford to, not after what had just happened. But the situation had changed. She wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was a player, and Bradley had unwittingly invited her into his game. The halls of LaGuardia Airport, once bustling with the typical noise of hurried travelers, now felt eerily quiet. Most passengers had gone to their gates, many of them still glued to their phones, watching the confrontation unfold through the lenses of cameras. It was as if time had slowed. Tasha could almost feel the weight of every second, the eyes of the world upon her. Bradley Winters led her to a quiet corner of the terminal, away from the chaos. There, seated in a plush leather chair, was a young woman no older than 30, who looked at Tasha with an expression of both concern and curiosity. "Miss Williams," Bradley began, his voice finally losing its earlier detachment. "This is Rebecca, the head of corporate communications. I've asked her to assist you in getting you on the next available flight." Tasha glanced at Rebecca, then back at Bradley. She could see that Rebecca's hands were trembling ever so slightly, but her professionalism was unmistakable. She was the kind of person who had been trained to stay calm in the eye of a storm. But Tasha wasn't interested in pleasantries. She wasn't interested in corporate spin. She wanted answers. "You're going to do more than just rebook my flight," Tasha said, her tone commanding. "You're going to explain to me why this happened in the first place. Why, and so many others, are treated this way. Why this airline, under your leadership, has become a symbol of privilege and prejudice." Bradley shifted in his chair, his jaw tightening. For the first time since the encounter began, he seemed uncomfortable. But Tasha wasn't going to let him off the hook, not after everything she had endured. "Look," she continued, "I've been discriminated against my whole life. It's not new to me. But this is different. It's not just some random incident. This is systematic. And I want answers. Now." Rebecca, ever the professional, stood up and walked over to the coffee station in the corner, as if giving the two of them space to hash it out. Tasha noticed that Bradley didn't speak right away. Instead, he looked out the large windows of the terminal, his face hardening. "You're right," he said after a long pause, his voice lower now, quieter. This isn't just about you. It's about something much bigger. Sky Globe has been spiraling for years, but we've been so focused on staying afloat that we overlooked the fact that the system we built has been eating away at us from the inside. You see, Tasha, it's not just the employees. It's the culture we've created, the one that favors people like me. Tasha raised an eyebrow. Bradley Winters wasn't just any CEO. He was the heir to the legacy of Sky Globe Airlines, a company that had once been a giant in the airline industry. His words were calculated, but there was a flicker of guilt in his eyes that she hadn't expected. "Why are you telling me this?" Tasha asked, her suspicion growing. "What do you want from me?" He sighed, clearly defeated. "I don't know how much longer Sky Globe will survive. We've been hemorrhaging money, losing customers, and worst of all, losing trust. But when I saw what happened to you, I realized something. We've ignored the systemic issues for too long, and it's not just going to fix itself. Maybe I need someone like you to help us change. I can't fix this alone." Tasha stared at him, her mind racing. This was more than just an apology, it was an invitation. But was it genuine? Or was it a desperate attempt to save face, to salvage his company's reputation after years of neglect? "I don't know what you think I can do for you," she said cautiously. "But this is more than just corporate restructuring. This is about changing the way people think. Changing a culture that has been allowed to thrive on discrimination and privilege." Bradley leaned forward, his voice intense. "I know. That's why I'm asking you. I want to give you the power to shape the future of this company, not as a consultant, not as a token, as an equal. We need you, Tasha. Sky Globe needs a new direction, and I'm willing to take the fall for it. This isn't just about fixing what's broken in the company, it's about fixing what's broken in our society." Tasha considered his words carefully. This was a moment of opportunity, a chance to not only change an entire industry, but to hold people accountable for their actions, for the harm they had caused to people like her. But it came with risks that could destroy everything she had worked for. Still, she couldn't ignore the pull of justice, the drive to dismantle systems that had long protected the powerful and left the marginalized behind. "All right," she said, her voice steady but full of razzles. "I'll help you. But understand this, if you want me to work with you, there will be no exceptions. No half measures. You either commit to real change or I walk. And if I walk, Sky Globe will fall." Bradley's eyes locked onto hers, a silent understanding passing between them. He knew the stakes. "I'm in," he said. "We're in this together now." Just then, Rebecca returned, her face strained but determined. "Tasha," she said, "we've secured you a seat on the next flight. First class, as it should be. And we've made sure your luggage has been prioritized. Everything is taken care of." Tasha nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. She wasn't about to let Bradley off the hook just yet. This was only the beginning. The real work would begin when she returned to her company, when she would take her place as a voice for those who had been silenced for far too long. As they walked toward the gate, the atmosphere in the terminal had shifted. The passengers who had witnessed the ordeal were still whispering, but now the conversation had changed. They weren't just talking about Tasha anymore. They were talking about Sky Globe, about how one woman had the power to bring down a corrupt institution. Asha sat back in the plush, first-class seat as the plane ascended. The engines hummed soothing, though her mind was anything but at ease. The flight to Berlin was long enough time for her to think, to process, and to plan the next steps. The situation with Sky Globe wasn't over, not by a long shot. Bradley Winters may have offered her a seat at the table, but Tasha knew that sitting there would be more than just navigating corporate corridors. It would mean reshaping the very foundation of an entrenched, discriminatory culture. The flight attendants moved down the aisle, offering drinks, but Tasha politely declined, her focus fixed out the window. The twinkling lights of the city below were a contrast to the storm brewing in her mind. She just made an enemy of an entire airline, but she also knew she had an opportunity to change the course of the industry. But it wasn't just about Sky Globe. It was about every airline, every company that had ignored the injustice staring them in the face. As the plane climbed higher into the clouds, Tasha couldn't help but think of her journey. She had always been the one who had to prove herself. Her entire life had been a testament to survival, a relentless grind against a world that expected her to fail, a world that told her she didn't belong. She'd proven them wrong every step of the way. But now it wasn't just about her. It was about the thousands of people who had faced the same systemic barriers, the ones who had been overlooked, underpaid, or outright disrespected because of the color of their skin. And she was done with that. When the plane touched down in Berlin, Tasha wasted no time. The summit awaited, and while it was a crucial moment for Titan Technologies, her mind wasn't solely focused on the keynote address anymore. The fight she had begun with Sky Globe was far from over, and she knew that the attention on her, especially after the airport incident, would only intensify. She was escorted directly to the conference center, where a team of local security was waiting for her. As she walked into the room, a mix of tech entrepreneurs, CEOs, and investors turned their attention toward her. She had become a symbol, but it was a symbol that carried with it a fierce sense of justice, one that no amount of corporate sponsorship could cover up. Tasha sat at the conference table, preparing for her address. She'd been rehearsing it in her mind for days, but now the words felt heavier. The message wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about accountability, about how these systems that perpetuate inequality could no longer be ignored. As she was introduced, the applause filled the air, but she barely heard it. Her mind was set on what needed to happen next. When her turn came, Tasha took the stage, standing tall before an audience that expected the usual business talk, the typical corporate gloss. But Tasha was done with gloss. She had something to say, something real. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady but strong. "I've spent most of my career building technology that can change the world. But today, I stand here not just as a CEO of a successful company, but as someone who is committed to changing something bigger, changing the way we do business. Because we're not just building products anymore. We're building a future, and that future must be just." The room fell silent. Some looked confused, others looked intrigued. But Tasha wasn't here to appease anyone. There's a cancer in our industries, a cancer that thrives on inequality, that builds walls around opportunity, that tells certain people they don't belong, she continued, her voice gaining strength. I've lived that. I've been told my place was not at the table, not in the room. I've been discriminated against, held back, and undermined by people who think their money, their influence, or their skin color gives them the right to make those decisions. But I'm here to tell you that the game has changed. She let the words sink in. The silence in the room was palpable. Then she spoke again, her eyes scanning the room. I'm here to make sure that when we build for everyone. I'm here to make sure that the systems of privilege and power that have controlled this industry for far too long will be dismantled. And it starts with me, right here, right now. I will no longer sit idly by while others are pushed aside. I will use my voice, my influence, and my resources to create a future where justice is not an afterthought, where diversity and inclusion are not buzzwords, where they are the foundation of everything we do. The room erupted in applause. But Tasha wasn't done. And I'm not the only one. Every one of you has a responsibility to hold yourselves accountable, to stop profiting from systems that suppress the marginalized, to change the way you do business or step aside for those who will. The energy in the room shifted. What had started as a typical business conference was now a call to action, and Tasha's words had lit the fuse. After the summit, Tasha had no intention of slowing down. She flew back to New York, where she immediately began organizing her next steps. She didn't just want to take on Sky Globe's culture of discrimination, she wanted to expose it, and she had the leverage she needed. Bradley Winters had given her a seat at the table, but now, Tasha planned to use that seat to make real, lasting change. She set up a meeting with Bradley to discuss the specifics of their agreement. She walked into the corporate offices of Sky Globe with an air of purpose, ready to make her demands clear. Bradley met her in his office, his posture now less regal, almost deferential. Tasha, I appreciate you taking the time to meet. I know we've had our differences, but I'm ready to start the work of real transformation. Tasha didn't waste time with pleasantries. I want full transparency from this company, Bradley. I want to see every internal policy, every hiring and promotion record. I want to know how much money Sky Globe has invested in diversity programs and how much of that has actually made a difference. I want action, not just words. Bradley nodded, but there was a hint of hesitation. That's a lot to ask for, Tasha. No, Tasha said, her voice cutting through the tension. What you're asking for is the bare minimum. I've been fighting my entire life to be heard, to be seen. And now I'm going to make sure no one else has to fight as hard as I did. Not while I'm here. She didn't wait for his response. She knew what she had to do next. She'd been given a seat at the table, but now she would make sure it was one worth sitting at. And if Bradley Winters wasn't on board with that vision, then she would take Sky Globe down with the same precision she had used to build Titan Technologies. The weeks following Tasha's meeting with Bradley Winters were nothing short of a whirlwind. She had become an unstoppable force. The partnership with Sky Globe Airlines had taken a turn one she had expected but wasn't sure would come so quickly. Tasha's demands for transparency and accountability weren't taken lightly, and Bradley, despite his reluctance, had agreed to open the doors to the inner workings of the company. But what he didn't know was that Tasha wasn't interested in reforming Sky Globe's broken system. She was here to expose it for all to see. Tasha had already begun her own investigation. She'd hired a team of skilled researchers and legal experts to go through Sky Globe's policies, financial statements, and hiring practices. What they uncovered was damning. The airline, once a symbol of luxury and excellence, had built its reputation on exploitation, discriminatory hiring practices, a history of overlooking complaints of harassment and racism, and an entire business model that catered exclusively to wealthy, mostly white customers. Tasha knew that the public would have to see this. It wasn't just about corporate accountability, it was about demanding a complete shift in the culture of big business. So she prepared her next move. She reached out to several major media outlets, including investigative journalists, and laid out her findings in a detailed report. The story wasn't just about Sky Globe. It was about how systemic racism and privilege were embedded in every corner of American industry, especially in the aviation world. The day the expose went live, The backlash was immediate and overwhelming. Social media erupted, with people sharing the details of Sky Globe's internal corruption and discrimination. A hashtag trended worldwide, #SkyGlobeExposed. Passengers, employees, and former clients began to speak out, sharing their own experiences with the airline's toxic culture. Sky Globe's stock price plummeted, lawsuits flooded in, and governments around the world began to investigate the airline's practices. The company's leadership scrambled, trying to contain the damage. Bradley Winters was called in front of Congress to testify, his silver hair now a symbol of his fall from grace. It wasn't just Sky Globe that had felt the impact of Tasha's actions. The media coverage had put a spotlight on Titan Technologies too. But for the first time, it was a spotlight of admiration and respect, not just corporate power. Tasha had become a symbol of resistance, a figurehead for those who had been overlooked, ignored, or discriminated against. She didn't revel in the chaos she'd unleashed. She understood the importance of the moment, but she wasn't the type to celebrate when so much was still at stake. In the days following the expose, Tasha gathered her team at Titan Technologies for an important announcement. She wanted them to know what was at stake for them as well. "Everything we've built at Titan," she began, standing before her team in the sleek, modern conference room of their New York headquarters, "was built on a foundation of fairness. And that's the foundation we'll continue to build on. We won't be the kind of company that thrives off discrimination. We will lead by example. Our success isn't just measured by profits, it's measured by how we treat people, how we lift others up." Her employees, many of them people of color, women, LGBTQ+ individuals, listened intently, nodding in agreement. Tasha had always been about inclusivity, and now her company would be more than just a tech giant. It would become a beacon for change in an industry that needed it most. Back in the Sky Globe offices, the fall of Bradley Winters had begun in earnest. Despite Tasha's willingness to negotiate for a restructured future, Bradley's refusal to make deep, systemic changes had sealed his fate. On the day of his congressional testimony, things took a final turn. The media had long since shifted their focus from the once revered airline to the shocking failures of its leadership. What was meant to be the defense of the company quickly turned into an indictment of everything that was wrong with corporate America. Bradley, flanked by lawyers and public relations specialists, tried to maintain his composure under the weight of public scrutiny. But then came the final blow. As Tasha watched the testimony from a screen in her office, she saw a moment unfold that would change everything. The final question was asked by a congresswoman who had followed Tasha's work closely. She had seen the impact of the expose and wanted to know what Sky Globe was doing to make things right. Bradley, flustered, avoided the question. He tried to deflect and protect his company, but the pressure was mounting. Then the congresswoman dropped the bombshell. She held up a file containing information that had been leaked anonymously, confirming that Sky Globe's board members had been directly involved in discriminatory hiring practices, turning a blind eye to complaints, and personally profiting from the exploitation of minority employees. Bradley's face drained of color. The room went silent as the implications set in. The evidence was undeniable. Sky Globe's leadership had been complicit in a culture of systemic racism and discrimination. The media erupted. Within hours, Bradley was removed from his position as CEO. The airline's board of directors quickly followed suit, stepping down one by one as investigations and lawsuits piled up. The government began its probe, and soon it wasn't just the company that was facing consequences. The entire airline industry began to reevaluate its practices, pressured by the public's outcry. Months later, the once proud airline was in the process of being restructured. A new CEO had been appointed, and Tasha Williams was at the helm of an advisory board designed to guide the company into a new era. She didn't own Sky Globe, but her influence over the new direction was undeniable. Her first action as part of the restructuring was to ensure the airline's new policies would prioritize inclusivity, diversity, and fair treatment for all employees, regardless of background. Tasha didn't just want to fix Sky Globe. She wanted to create a model that could be adopted by other companies, proving that true corporate success could only come when fairness and equity were at the center of the operation. Her work wasn't done, not by a long shot. But Tasha Williams had accomplished what many thought impossible. She had toppled an empire built on discrimination and privilege. And in its place, she had begun to build something better. Sky Globe, under new leadership, slowly began to recover, but it would never be the same. Tasha's voice had changed the game for good, and now she had a platform not only to help Sky Globe rise from the ashes, but also to ensure the entire industry knew that the days of exploiting people of color and women were over. As Tasha looked out over the skyline from her office, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. The fight was never easy, but the victory was hers. She had fought for the people who had been silenced, overlooked, and pushed aside. She had made her mark on the world, and now her legacy would carry on, a legacy of justice, accountability, and the courage to speak out in the face of adversity. She knew the work was far from over, but Tasha Williams had proved something crucial. Power wasn't just about wealth or status. True power came from standing firm in the face of injustice and daring to tear down the walls that had been built to keep others out. And with that, she stepped forward into the future, ready for the next battle.